Language is the incredible way we are able to communicate with one another. It is the very means we use to express our thoughts to other people. But is it always such a one-way street? Is language simply a tool humans use to communicate, a medium we actively manipulate to express our thoughts? Or can it ever go the other way around? Can language possibly influence our thoughts? This is the very question that linguistic relativity addresses. The main proponent of this seemingly nonsensical suggestion, Mr. Worf, states that 1. Languages vary in their semantic partitioning of the world. 2. The structure of one's language influences the manner in which one perceives and understands the world. And 3. Therefore, speakers of different languages perceive the world differently. This fascinating proposition has come to be known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, although it has certainly died down in terms of novelty, and remains the least empirically studied hypothesis in linguistics. It certainly raises some serious implications. If languages can have control over our thoughts, are we really free-thinking beings? My research then explores this very notion. That is, does experience in a certain language affect one's language-independent thought? I wondered if fluent French speakers, or speakers of other languages with a grammatical gender as well, perceive the world differently compared to speakers of non-grammatical gendered languages, such as English. Basically, I wondered if the assignment of gender in languages affect the thought of its speakers. Of course, I don't mean to wonder whether French people think all apples are girls, because it's a feminine word in French. Rather, more subtly, do French speakers mentally represent the apples, for example, as a more feminine object? To answer this ambitious question, I used a grade 11 class of approximately 30 students. Roughly half were in French immersion, and I created a survey that outlined 12 words, where half were feminine in French and the other half masculine. Each word had corresponding adjectives that I created to describe them. One of the adjectives for each word would be stereotypically feminine, and the other would be stereotypically masculine. So, for example, the word ice, which is feminine in French, may have the words exquisite and delicate to describe it, as well as formidable and threatening. And I do have a small disclaimer. I realize that I am using gender stereotypes, and furthermore stereotypes that are possibly only predominant in North America. This has been noted. Then I asked them to circle one pair of adjectives that you feel best describe its respective concept. So what would you answer? Would you most likely describe a chair as sturdy or supporting? I predicted that the French immersion students would subconsciously choose the set of adjectives that corresponded to the word's grammatical gender, while the non-French immersion students' results would be more neutral. Thus, the French immersion students should choose the word supporting. So what were my results? Well, the majority of the words answered by the French immersion students were, in fact, correspondent to its grammatical gender, but not by much. Only 7 out of 12 words, or 53%, corresponded to their gender. Those words were chair, doctor, cat, leader, mountain, sun, and ice. 2 of the words were actually fairly neutral, ocean and moon. This just means that the word was categorized masculine about half the time and feminine the other half. And 3 of the words were answered opposite to its grammatical gender, which was surprising: dog, house, and car. The English speakers actually labeled more neutral words than the French immersion, as predicted. These neutral words to the non-French immersion students were chair, dog, leader, and ice. 4 of the words, too, were very similarly categorized to how the French immersion students classified the word. Those words were cat, house, mountain, and car. The other third of the words were not as strongly labeled as the French immersion students. These words were ocean, doctor, moon, and sun. However, these 4 words still lean toward the same gender categorization compared to the French immersion students, which is not too convincing for my hypothesis. There were a few interesting examples to compare though, one being the word sun, which is a masculine word in French. 92% of the French immersion students labeled the word sun to be more masculine, while the number was only 68.75% for the non-French immersion students. So, what are my conclusions from such results? Well, add in the other possible confounding factors involved, and conclusively, there doesn't seem to be a strong correlation at all. But, perhaps with a larger group and French native speakers, it would truly be interesting to see if my research question could still be supported. Still, this research project was definitely a fun way to see the world through a different perspective. That is, by simply changing the language. Thanks for listening.